Hi, I'm Jack Draper. Shout out to QualityShot Tennis.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz dominated proceedings this week on the clay, and Holger Rune and Dusan Lajovic are also the other winners as well this week. We're going to talk about the wins, mainly focusing on Iga Swiatek and Carlos Alcaraz. I'll timestamp the video as well, so that if people just want to focus on listening to Iga Swiatek or watch Iga Swiatek's bit, then they can watch that. Similarly with Carlos Alcaraz, if you're more interested in that, then you can tune into that part of the video as well. Before we get into it though, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you are new, and also to do a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Our updated ATP and WTA power rankings will also be out soon, and of course the draw for Madrid is now out, so the ATP and WTA draw preview and prediction videos will be out for those as well. Okay, let's get into it then. So let's start off with the women. Iga Swiatek beating Aryna Sabalenka in straight sets, and it promised to be a very entertaining and competitive match. And in the end, we did get that for very large periods of the match, but in the end, Swiatek was a comfortable winner, 6-3, 6-4 in straight sets, and the Polish number one and world number one proved why she is the woman to be on clay. I think, given she's won 2 Roland Garros titles and has only lost 4 matches on clay in the last few years and won 40 matches, if I'm not mistaken, just shows how impressive she is. And she defended her title in Stuttgart, a title which she actually beat Sabalenka to win last year in the final as well. That was a lot more comprehensive. So Sabalenka showing some really positive signs of improvement on the clay and on the clay against Iga Swiatek, but it still wasn't enough, despite her game definitely being taken to the next level. It still wasn't enough to, I think, bridge the gap between the two on this surface. Indoor conditions did suit Sabalenka's serve more than, say, Swiatek's, but overall the surface is still red, it's still clay, it still plays pretty slowly, and Swiatek used that to her advantage. Very heavy forehand, as we know, really does utilize it really well, and dictates with that side. And I thought she returned really well against Sabalenka for the most part as well. That was very impressive. I think Sabalenka has a much bigger serve than Swiatek, but Swiatek is a better returner than the Belarusian, and that showed, I think, throughout. Sabalenka started to attack the second serve more effectively as the match wore on, and there were some really, really close games, and she kept on taking Swiatek to juice on her service game, but wasn't able to break in that first set. That was a little bit disappointing, I think, for Sabalenka, and I think the biggest thing for me was she just wasn't quite as clinical as Swiatek. I mean, she didn't convert that single breakpoint opportunity she did get, and she did have big inroads in that second set on Swiatek's serve, but wasn't able to bring up multiple breakpoints and really push the Polish superstar. So that was the real difference, I think, between the two players, in honesty. Double faults, not really much to talk about on that. 2 double faults apiece, and I know Sabalenka, to be fair, did concede the break in the second set with a double fault, but that's not the reason why she lost that game. There's other points where she lost by just being a little bit too loose in the ground stroke exchanges and went for too much. There was one exchange where she tried to go down the line with the forehand from 3 meters behind the baseline and pushed off court, which is a really wild shot to try. So there were just some moments where she was a little bit ultra aggressive and too aggressive, playing too high risk tennis for any chance of really being able to succeed, I think, in this match, in all honesty. But she's definitely made improvements, as I said, and that's a real positive sign for her. For Swiatek, though, a dominant performance, and she'll be the one to beat on the clay for the rest of the season. We're going to Madrid, and she'll go into that the favourite, and Rome as well, and then Roland Garros. And unless something crazy happens in Madrid and Rome, where she loses really early on to players, I don't think and don't see her going into Roland Garros as anything but a clear favourite, in all honesty. Interesting to see if we see Rybakina come up against Swiatek on the clay. I think, obviously, on the quicker surfaces, she's got an advantage, it seems, Rybakina against Swiatek, but the matchup doesn't really suit the Polish player, but on clay, on her favourite surface, on her home surface, you might say, things might be a little bit different. But Swiatek and Sabalenka, the rallies, just to finish up on that matchup and how the final went. As the rallies went on longer, Swiatek predictably was winning the majority of the points. Her shot tolerance is much better than Sabalenka's, despite Sabalenka's controlled aggression and newfound controlled aggression that is definitely a lot more accurate and a lot more effective in the past 6 months. But I think Swiatek knows how to use angles well. I think both players were trying to use their angles. Sabalenka, to be fair, did win some points as they went longer, but generally speaking, she just struggled. I think Swiatek, especially when she was being very good defensively, there was one point where she made Sabalenka hit 2 smashes. The first smash she got back into play. Sabalenka then the second smash went into the net, and there was a little bit of a feeling of frustration on that side of the net. That she wasn't able to break down Swiatek maybe as easy as she would have hoped. And the courts being slower just favours someone who defensively is very good. And Swiatek is defensively very good and is able to transition well to attack. Also, the depth as well on her ground strokes got out of trouble in a lot of occasions where Sabalenka was on the front foot and somehow Swiatek was firing back and didn't necessarily need to be with a lot of pace, but with really good depth on the ground strokes in response to Sabalenka's aggression, and it would get her back to neutral or on the front foot very, very quickly. And that was really impressive from her. And she continues to impress, I think, not only on the clay, but generally speaking, with how she is trying to improve her game and evolve. And both these players have been very consistent so far this year. And I think that's going to continue. That's going to be a trend as the year goes on, and probably alongside someone like Rybakina as well, as she's been very, very good this year as well. Now, for Carlos Alcaraz, it was another victory over Stefanos Tsitsipas. 4-0 is now the head-to-head between the two. He's extended that. And, it was a little bit of a disappointing match, I have to say, for Stefanos Tsitsipas, just because a lot of people are thinking maybe he'll finally get revenge over Alcaraz and he'll make a splash. He'll really be able to finally make some sort of statement against the Spaniard. But it wasn't to be. Really just outclassed, and it was a little bit reminiscent of the Indian Wells final between Alcaraz and Medvedev, where Alcaraz just thoroughly outplayed him, and it was just a level above on the day. And it seemed like something similar happened in this match, in all honesty. He utilized the drop shot really effectively. We know how good he is with it, but the disguise on that shot, and hit a lot of into out drop shot forehand winners, or ended up being a 1 point in the end anyway. And the disguise on that shot, I think, was very good because he was hurting Tsitsipas with the into out forehand, which I predicted he would do in the preview, and of course the in-to-in forehand. And I think that change-up really did put Tsitsipas off because he was so defensively behind the baseline by a couple of meters already. Didn't need to be a particularly good drop shot. Also, I thought Alcaraz, despite going a breakdown early on and Tsitsipas not being able to capitalize on it, he just came back strong and he was really edging Tsitsipas in the exchange. Tsitsipas had to do a lot to win points against Alcaraz and play some phenomenal tennis at times, but overall it just wasn't enough. I know some people were a little bit disappointed with Tsitsipas's display. Look, the first set percentage could have been high. It was only at 57%, only one ace. Alcaraz actually hit 3 aces, by the way, which is interesting. He outserves Tsitsipas, 77% of first serves in. First serve points won 81% for Alcaraz, 70% for Tsitsipas. And this is probably the stat that will really annoy Tsitsipas. Second serve points won for Alcaraz, 8 out of 11 won, 73%. That's way too high. Tsitsipas wasn't really punishing him on the second serve. And for Tsitsipas, 11 out of 23, so only 48% of points won there. Break points saved, 3 out of 6 for Tsitsipas, 1 out of 2 for Alcaraz. Just generally, it wasn't a particularly good match for Tsitsipas, and the matchup between the two continues to heavily favor Alcaraz. Tsitsipas, despite it being on clay, despite it being a slower surface, the backhand is still in jeopardy against Alcaraz. It really is. And also his serve as well tends to be nullified massively on this surface by Alcaraz being a fantastic returner. Tsitsipas didn't really come to the net as much as he should have. I know against Musetti came in a lot and he had a lot of success. I get that Alcaraz is very good at passing players, but it would have been nice to see him come in a bit more as well. I think he was a little bit tentative because he was a bit afraid maybe that Alcaraz was going to come up with something special to pass him. But look, Alcaraz was the favorite going into this, and he was the favorite to win the tournament. He's done so. Is he the man to beat? Well, we'll have to see. Djokovic, of course, lost to Lajovic, and we'll touch upon Lajovic and Rune's wins as well very, very shortly. But, you know, I think Djokovic is looking like he may have some issues with his elbow. He's pulled out of Madrid. Nadal's absent from Madrid, so keep an eye out for my WTA and ATP draw preview and predictions for Madrid. But Alcaraz is going to be the favourite, you could say, right, going into that. But yeah, really, really good display from the Spaniard and just looks super comfortable. Super comfortable, honestly. I think those couple of tournaments he played on the clay earlier in the year probably have helped as well. Just get him a little bit of feel on the surface early doors. But he needs to be careful about peaking too early. I know he's young, but he doesn't want to peak well before Roland Garros and then go into Roland Garros on a downward trend and then potentially lose early on or earlier than he'd like. And that probably draws a little bit of a parallel between now and last year, where he won Madrid, really good, beating Djokovic and Nadal. Obviously skipped Rome and Roland Garros. He lost in the quarterfinals to Zverev. If I was him as well, I would also make sure I play Rome 100%. If he's feeling any niggles, if I was him, I'd just say I'll pull out Madrid then. But I'll make sure I'll play Rome because Rome plays the most like Roland Garros in terms of the speed of the court and also just the surface generally there. So definitely worth playing that. For Tsitsipas, you know, definitely some things to work on. I think, you know, he said after, you know, don't be so greedy. In tongue-in-cheek, said don't be so greedy. You know, leave some for the rest of us to Alcaraz, and said that he looks up to the Spaniard as well, despite him being younger. I think, you know, there's some great words from Tsitsipas, very gracious, but I think he needs to get into the mindset that he should be winning these tournaments, beating these guys. I think he does have that. When they did the ATP prediction video about who's going to win what tournament, he was saying himself for a lot of them. Now, we'll see what this does for his confidence going forward. But if I was him, I would just say, look, okay, Alcaraz is not a great matchup for me. Fine. I'll deal with that when it comes to it. But I played some really good tennis this week. I made the final of Barcelona, you know, onwards and upwards. Let's go into Madrid and try and take that momentum into it. So we'll see how he gets on. But for Alcaraz, he just goes from strength to strength. And I'll probably do a more in-detailed technical analysis on Alcaraz when possible as well, because he's a very interesting player to talk about. Okay, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Before we wrap up, very quickly, Holger Rune beat Van der Zandschulp in 3 sets in Munich. And this was a bit of a shocker for Van der Zandschulp because he was 5-2 up or 5-1 up and had multiple match points, 4 match points in that third set after winning the second set 6-1. He didn't manage to take the match points. Rune broke back from 5-2 down, and it went to a tiebreaker, 7-6 to Rune in that third set, 7-3 in the tiebreaker. Van der Zandschulp posted after saying this one hurt, and Rune will definitely know how he feels because he had a similar. Well, he was in a very similar position against Rublev last week, where he was 4-1 up, I think it was, in the final set. Didn't manage to convert and hold his nerve. So, yeah, really, really interesting scenes in Munich. But Rune wins another tournament, ATP tournament. But for Van der Zandschulp, he'll feel very, very aggrieved. And also, Dusan Lajovic carried on his fantastic form after beating Djokovic, beat Kecmanovic, and now beat Andrei Rublev in the final. So he's on a hot streak. Already is 6-3, 4-6, 6-4. Rublev Now, you could argue that he might be a little bit fatigued. He's played a lot of tennis recently, won Monte Carlo as well. Interesting to see if he plays Madrid. I imagine he will. He barely misses any tennis, but he'll be a little bit disappointed because Lajovic is someone he's expected to beat. But in the end, the Serb producing some really good tennis, and that's fantastic to see as well. Guys, thank you very much for tuning in. Remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Thank you, guys. We'll see you very soon.